So for a highly sensitive person, right, there's different levels. And category 1, right, I don't have a person that comes into my practice that isn't having trouble letting go of situations, right? Because a highly sensitive person is reading so much into that the why, right, is perplexing, right? So they're not focused on the situation as much as why, right? And there's a level of hypervigilance around that. My grandson is hypersensitive and highly sensitive, and literally why comes out of his mouth every 3 seconds, right? Now, often these children just in and of themselves, without like having any level of trauma, right, have trouble eating and sleeping, right? They have trouble calming their minds enough to rest. And I do believe that they are also like, reading a level of energies in the room that others aren't seeing, right? My grandson used to have full-blown conversations with energies in his room, right? And that can be, and I've had many clients, right, whose moms come in and be like, my daughter's having these full-blown conversations, and I don't know if they're good conversations, I'm not sure, right? Like, that's a very scary place to be, and thank God that's a mom that's paying attention. Yeah, right. So we have to recognize that. And they really, also their level of sensitivity in their skin is so high, right, that the conflict of energies is almost a combustion. Now, I had a grown woman the other day that's just learning about her empathic skills and different things like that, and she was reaching back into an old relationship and actually like planning, like she was moving, so she was planning this like final night with this human, and she got close to his house and their energies hit, and she had this huge meltdown. And often they feel they have to find blame for that, right? Because they're not understanding what's happening. I said, you want to congratulate your energies for recognizing, right, that meld of energy is not going to be in your highest and best, right? Now, what was amazing is she turned around and went back home, right? But then she had to blame him for something. And I said, stop blaming. This is your energies protecting you in the highest and best way, right? And when we can learn to read those energies, right, and pull them out from our trauma, right? Now, this woman came here and was here for 4 days, and like there's no trauma left in her body. So, these responses are now a level of her intuition and her empathy and her high level of sensitivity, right? So it's like her system getting an upgrade enough to where that isn't bowling her over, and her awareness is equal to her ability. Does that make sense? Right? That is an evolution of that human, right? To be able to be in the world and not of it. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. And it's like, the inner contact, the inner integrity, integration of melting away the trauma, right? Means that we can sense the energy field around us and sense the other person's energy coming in towards our field, and decide, whether we want to or not interact.
Yeah. Now, she was so upset by that experience, right? Because we have to also understand is we're turning them around, right? New perceptions and interpretations of what they're feeling are important, right? So she took that as, you know, an affront from him in some way, and had to find a reason to blame him versus recognizing that that interaction was not in her highest and best, and being grateful
Yeah.
for her body's knowingness around that, right?
It was just new learning for her, right?
It's new learning, and we're teachers of that. We're teachers of that. That's why we have to know, because otherwise that would have become another traumatic event, right? And another stake of blame in the ground, right?
Yeah.
Rather than an empowering moment, right? Because it was a very empowering moment. I said, do you understand your bubbles touched and your intuition was, your body was repelled? That is amazing, not terrible. Pay attention. Yeah. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
absolutely. It absolutely totally makes sense. Yeah. And it's just, you know, when somebody is used to having trauma in their body and being in a reactive mode, it's their kind of their go-to place. So we have to teach them to turn that around.
Yeah. And to use their superpowers rather than be bowled over by them.
Yeah.
Right? Because they lived their life being suffering because of their superpowers rather than being empowered by them. Now, the category 2 of a highly sensitive, right? They take things very personally, right? They get defensive very easily because their integrity feels to be in question, right? Again, they struggle to let things go. Their feelings get hurt very easily. That's something we have to spend a lot of time around. Your feelings can't be hurt. People can disagree with you without that being a problem. That doesn't mean you have to change your mind, right? Your
Yeah.
body gets hurt. Your feelings are there as information for you so that you can tell the person in front of you what they would like them to do different, right? People want to know what they can do, not what you're feeling, right? And that space is a huge turnaround and revelation for highly sensitive people, right? Because in our world today, we've been guided right into our feelings, and there isn't a spiritual teacher on the planet that guides us there. They're always guiding us away from it, right? So the fact that in our world today, we're guided to make people or try to convince people to understand our feelings, right? There's a lot of combustion and a lot of conflict around because people, you know, your feelings are for you. They are not to convince someone, right? That your body is bringing in this information, and if it's circulating through your wisdom circuit, up through your heart, through your left and right brain and your intuition, so that you can make a clear choice, right? So that means if somebody is coming up to you and they are bombarding you with something that is unpleasant, that means you can look at them, you can take in the information, recognize how you're feeling, and say, I hear you, and it is important for me that you do this, that, and the other. Most often, if you can give a person an action, they're going to do it, right? When I can guide women in relationships to that, right? Rather than trying to talk to their husbands about their feelings versus talking to their husband about what they can do different to make you not feel that way, right?
Yeah.
Cuts through all the good, right? Feelings are gooey. And they're usually reflected of your personal experience. So trying to get someone else to understand that from that perspective is very difficult and very frustrating for highly sensitive people. Right now, they have a very difficult time. Again, we talked about that, getting defensive, right? Accepting feedback, right? Because they take things so personally. So, right, that's why our focus is that why we focus so much on our wording of things. Right?
Yeah, I have a
Because
relationship.
they will pick your words apart, highly sensitive people. Right?
Yeah. I have a relationship where I'm an empath and she's highly sensitive. And yet at the same time, she has really rough edges. And when she gives me feedback, it is, I feel, really highly critical. So
it's true, because a highly sensitive person, right? It's like they are truth prophets. And they are very rough around the edges, right? They just cut through the chase. There's very little fluff in how they're going to deliver that. Now, what's interesting is an empath is a highly sensitive person as well. That's one of the utmost things. So an empath is all this and, right? So as we move forward, right? Now,
okay.
you know, a highly sensitive person feels injustice in many situations because, again, they're always, you know, their receiver, right? Their body is like a high tech receiver, right? So that feeling of being, of the, what am I trying to say? The energies being dissident is very disruptive, right? And often they have no container to put that in, right? Because they don't understand energies. We're not taught about that, right? And what we are taught about it is very, it's very intangible. Right. And that's part of why we have the vernacular. That's why we're coming around this, because, you know, being psychic is very tangible. Right. All this is very tangible if you look at it from a perspective of molecules and energy flow. Right. So, you know, now you take OCD and overlap a highly sensitive person with the description of OCD, and it's pretty similar, right? A highly sensitive person living in a abusive, consistently abusive home, OCD ends up being often, those symptoms end up being a part of that C-PTSD loop that they're trying to rise out of. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So often it is, I guess what I love in this process is, you know, taking a person from feeling like there's no hope and that they're ill, and opening the door to understanding that they're truly a superhero and the world really needs them, you know, and they are, right? These are the shamans of the world that we're not seeing anymore, right? These people like are the ones that like in the indigenous in those times would have been exalted. Yeah. Now, category 3, the startle is huge, right? They startle very easily. Often they don't want to drive, right? They being in crowds is very difficult because they're getting hits all around, right? And like my grandson, if you walk past him, and my ex-husband too, if you walk past them like too close, they're going to jump as if you had ran over them, right? Their energies, they're feeling you so intensely that they physically will go like this, sometimes walking past, if they're not aware of it, which is interesting, right? Now, the bright lights, flashing lights, loud sounds, strong scents, that is pretty universal with highly sensitive people. So everyday activities can be difficult, right? Noise, like going to a grocery store, is a bombardment to a highly sensitive person, between all the smells, all the people bumping into you, the differentiation between the temperature of outside, inside, right? Like, you know, highly sensitive people often very much struggle with the grocery store, right? So that's something we're always creating strategy around these. It's like, so what? Order your groceries and go pick them up. Let's not even like try to fight that battle. Why? A grocery store is a kind of a weird place, so that's fine, right? You know, now the flashing lights with a highly sensitive person can send them into a seizure, right? It can send them into dissociation, right? It can get their throw up, right? You know, I can remember when I was young and had no idea of any of this, right? And church was very difficult, right? Being trapped in the pew, not being able to get out, all the women around me wearing a different perfume, and the colognes and the incense that they were swinging around in church, and like, you know, I passed out in church. I can't even explain how many times. So, you know, understanding this brings some desensitizing to these experiences, right? Because the fear of the consequence of them being overwhelmed by these noises and lights and sounds is worse than understanding. Sit on the end of the pew. Make sure you're on the end of the pew so that you can get out if you need to and go get some air. You can always come back. Yeah, these are the way we have to maneuver that. But as practitioners, we have to start separating that out too. And, you know, once a person is through those 90 days and you know, their timeline is clear. Now, through that 90 days, like, obviously, we're starting to recognize, right? Okay, they're telling a story of an experience, and that feels real time. You're not seeing a trace back to an old experience, yeah? Right? And you're starting in your mind going, okay, right? We're recognizing noises are a problem. We're recognizing lights are a problem, right? We're recognizing that they're having trouble sleeping, right? So separating out why they're having trouble sleeping, right? And what needs to happen, right? Sometimes an alternative noise helps, right? To where their brain is thinking about like a fan over all the voices that they can perceive around them. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some
And TV
some
is
white
a real
noise.
big thing for highly sensitive people, right? The news is a really big thing for highly sensitive people. Facebook is a very big thing for highly sensitive people, triggering them, right? Because again, they don't understand injustice, and they don't understand, you know, the violence and you know, right now our entertainment is violence and hate. Like, that's what it is, right? So for them to watch TV, they're not gonna sleep after something like that, right? So as we're maneuvering them, we're also creating new patterns, right? And new understandings around their gifts, yeah. Yeah, crowds, lots of people, because I find that they're also very telepathic, so their brain is trying to differentiate between all the conversations of people in a crowd, right? And then, you know, that becomes just static, which your brain kind of wants to shut down. Often people will have like drop attacks, or like I said, their brain wants to shut down because it's too much information. I myself, like, I went to Mexico and I was there for about 8 months, and people would come in to work with me or visit, and you know, they were like, so are you taking Spanish? Are you learning the language? And I'm like, absolutely not. This is the first time in my entire life that my brain is resting. Yeah. This is the first time in my life, like when I first got there, I can remember feeling my brain feeling so odd because it was trying to understand what people were saying, but then it kind of just shut down and was like, I don't know what to do with that information, so I'm not even going to scan it. So it was like truly the first time where I could just sit on the beach and at peace, or, you know. So yeah, I find that often that level of the scope with which they're scanning for information is extraordinary. Yeah. Alanis Morissette had to quit performing, right? Because of the lights and the noise of the crowd, and you know, all the energy in the space. She had to quit performing.
Who was this?
Alanis Morissette. She's from Canada.
Oh yeah.
Loved her. So we have to think of just, you know, a child who has this level of sensitivity, and they're embedded in a home where yelling is a norm, right? Hands are flying, right? You know, they startle easily, so hands are flying, right? The ground is unpredictable, right? They're already starting to fragment, and maybe nothing has ever happened to them personally. Yeah, right? They're just dissociating. They're like wanting to get away from the noise. Yeah, movement and sound. And often I find that highly sensitive people and empaths want to get in the middle of things, right?
Yeah.
Because they cannot stand that is happening. So they'd almost rather be beaten themselves than to watch someone get beaten, right?
Yeah.
You know, so often you'll find that they're inserting, right? And they become the mouthpiece for the family. So they end up becoming the target. Yeah. Yeah, so we have to recognize that as we move into being an empath, you know, I'd like for you to recognize these similarities, right? As we open that door, because, you know, I probably have 4 out of 5 people that, you know, say I'm an empath. And it's difficult for them to understand that most everyone we see is an empath. That's not unique to them, right? Their level of sensitivity is not unique to them, right? It's just that, you know, they are unaware. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I just want to go back to the narcissist for a second. The narcissist is on the other end of the empath, but the narcissist is somebody who's shut down their empath side in favor of being egotistical and
Well, I
manipulative.
wouldn't look at it like that, but a narcissist has been abused too. And their responses, it's like watching a kid become a bully, right? You know, they're getting hit, and, you know, that is playing forward, right? So a narcissist is a mind bender, right? A narcissist is a mind bender, right? And they can mess with your head. They can mess with people's heads, right? Just like a gaslighter, right? That is a mind bender too, where they can get inside your head and confuse you. And, you know, they
Yeah.
can play that puzzle very quickly, right? And get you confused, right? And a narcissist is a highly charismatic person usually, right? People are drawn to them, interestingly enough, right? And they can use that, right? And a narcissist comes in many shapes and forms, right? Spiritual teachers, right? You know, there's a lot of those out there. So now, often I find with schizophrenia is that their level of perception is very, and their fear level is very high, right? So having that mind-blowing access and not knowing what to do with it or what any of it means, right? Like, there's no way to function. Now, often I find that schizophrenics are fractured as well. So that going in different directions, right, is feeds right into that. That scattered, fragmented thought feeds right into that. We have to understand that the universe or God, whatever, is a gigantic sea of information. And where we put our attention in that sea of information, right, is what we experience, right? That's why we're always saying, like, you know, it's a benevolent God. He's not dictating, you know, or the universe is benevolent. Where you put your attention, energy grows. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
all of that, right? Because that sea of information is, you know, if we pare it down to what we know in the 3D, it's like the internet. If I were to sit and research how to kill myself on the internet all day, I'm probably going to be creating a plan, right? Same thing, right? If I am researching all day angels, I'm going to have a different bent, right? So we have to understand that. Often when I sat with numerous people with that diagnosis, and I was realizing that they were getting a lot of hits, right? And they were seeing a lot of pictures and interpreting them from a fear-based lens, right? One of my gifts is I can look through people's eyes, right? That is like empath hone, right? Hone. So being able to look through another person's eyes and experience what they're seeing and having what I'm seeing overlapping, right? I'm realizing that we're seeing the same thing. It's just that I'm not afraid of it and I'm more curious and interested. Yeah, does that make sense?
Oh my, every sentence that you're giving me is practically a, you know, it's a story. So
I know, this is you, right? I mean, this is me, right? This is how we become who we are. And what I
yeah,
want to say to you is that when we can get someone through this process, all these labels that are negative become these empowered labels. And like I had this one guy go discover a galaxy. What the heck? Right? So, you know, when we can get on purpose, and all of this isn't focused on ourselves, which is our narcissistic as well. Right? A lot of what our world has us in right now is goo, right? Sit around and think about yourself all day and try to convince people to think how you're thinking and how you're feeling. And, you know, it's not that, no spiritual teacher would lead us there, you know. So what I'm realizing with the highly sensitive empaths in and of themselves, if they didn't even have trauma, if they are suffering from that, like their system, their physical system needs an upgrade, right? It's like trying to take 2022 programs and insert them into a 1979 computer. They're shorting out, right? Their entire system, their nervous systems are shorting out, like migraines, throwing up, like everything is out of whack because all this information is coming in and they don't have the ability to process it in the state of awareness they're in, right? So that's super fun to watch people go through that upgrade process and suddenly be like spouting off wisdom right beside you. Yeah. Right. So we have to recognize that the fear-based words are what we log our in memory, are the words are how our memory is logged. So if we're logging everything with fear-based words, we're also categorizing today with those same fear-based words. That is their default programming system. So if my normal go-to is a bucket of fear-based words to describe my experience, right? What I experienced today may turn into a nightmare tomorrow. Was it a nightmare? No, not necessarily. Yeah, right? I may have told you this story, but I have one client whom I love dearly, and, you know, finding joy was a focus for her, right? Because she grew up in great hardship. And, you know, she would send me videos of her having fun. And a week later, when she would tell me about the fun, it was the most dire, depressing story. Her face is fallen, right? And then I'd show her the video and I'd be like, look, you were having fun. The words you used that day are very different than these words. Do you understand that? You're cataloging your memory, right? Over here in the gray. Let's flower it up a little bit because you were laughing and genuinely having so much fun, right? So being able to shift those words for them is huge too, right? So there's, you know, certain people where I'll just be like, okay, right? Now, from this moment on, I'm going to call you when you use that word. I'm going to call you out, right? Because that word is very defining for you.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. And it pulls you right back into the goo. We also have to understand that words have morphic fields, right?
Yeah.
And so the alchemy of how we're putting those words together create outcome, right? There you can, you know, the master speakers have an amazing authority over the alchemy of word, right? So if they're inserting into their story these words that have these gloomy morphic fields, pretty soon the whole story's gloomy. Does that make sense? And, right, you know, I think it's very important too to help a person understand with their words where they are on that spectrum. Like I've got one woman who, you know, would define every experience she had as disastrous and catastrophic. And she had never in her lifetime had a disastrous or catastrophic. Right? What can her world look like if that's the picture she's painting with her words? Right? Her mom, right, was controlling. That's different. Right? She always had a home, she always had money, she always had food, nobody ever beat her, nobody ever hurt her, you know what I mean? That's different. We have to place that on that spectrum. Because if they think they have experienced the worst thing on the planet, like, how do you get them out of that? Right? Because they haven't. Yeah? Right? Does that make sense too? So I'll be like, is it possible that, you know, you were disappointed? That's different than being crushed. Right? Could it be possible that's why that sheet of emotional words, emotional descriptors in the hub is important? Pull that out and be like, okay, can we insert a different, more appropriate word, right, for this experience? Right? Because their bucket of words is very childish. You know, usually a child is happy or mad. Yeah? So that expansion of that emotional system and evolution of that is important for us to pay attention to as well. So as we're integrating these fragments, right, we're bringing integrity and unity through these systems and giving an upgrade across the board through their 5 systems at once, right? In between, we're supporting their new space, right? We're celebrating, right? You know, I have a young woman who was diagnosed with OCD very young, like 5, right? Had huge traumatic upbringing. And in developing these new perceptions and these new ways to interact, right, we're also bringing awareness to that her initial hit to things is right on. It's what she does with it, right? Because she falls into that highly sensitive, like, oh, were they talking about me? Were they this? Were they that? Which becomes a very narcissistic place. So her recognizing that like, you are probably the furthest person, are the last thing on this person's mind as they're talking. Most people aren't sitting around thinking about you, right? And that recognition for her is slowing down the responses. Does that make sense? So that, like, she came in last night with 3 interactions, right? And, you know, turning her perceptions around is happening faster and faster and faster. And her constant, you know, which is very disempowering to her when she is right, and then she comes back in and chips away at it. Right? Were you talking about me? Did you think I didn't know that? Because I did know that, right? Why would you say that to me? Blah, 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 blah. And all those questions are disempowering to herself and everyone around her. Because it's real and true, she's at the high end of her team if she would stop talking. Right? And that's a thing we're working on. right? Because when she, she was housebound, right? So us walking her through being able to be at work and interacting with people, and when she first started working, like, she was chasing people down the hall, banging on elevators, trying to clarify, right? And I'd be like, honey, no one cared about that anymore, right? You're making a mess where there wasn't one. You know what I mean? So she's starting to recognize that. And she was very abusive in her questioning because she was rude and intrusive. And I said,
So she was
rude
highly
and
sensitive.
intrusive. Yeah, she's highly sensitive, right? But the way she would word things were intrusive. And she would ask questions about, oh, did you go to the bathroom? Did you have to go poo? Right? How much
Yeah.
toilet paper did you use when you wiped? Did you wash your hands? How long were you in there? Like those kind of things. And it's like, that's none of your business, right? But that's how far out her antennas are going, right? So again, that 6 feet big is super important.
Yeah.
Because her antennas are going out too far. I'd be like, honey, that's none of your business. Like, people are offended by those questions. Yeah. So everything that's showing up around these people we're using as breadcrumbs, because like I said, it's all magical pieces. It's all magical pieces, and it's really beautiful to watch, right? And, as we're tracing and tracking, through their stories, we're finding commonalities of words, we're finding commonalities of situations, right? And where I'm going to say how I do it. I'm always judging, like, how old they seem with their responses, right? Sometimes their face will even change, their voice will change, right? When they move into these responses or reaction spaces, right? And I know that a fragment is there, right? And and then at that moment, but maybe, and I let people know going in, right? This journey isn't about your story. So if I interrupt you, right, that's a good thing. Let's go play, right? And I will, in that very moment, they may be mid-sentence and I'll be like, wait, stop, close your eyes. How old do you feel right now? Right? And that's how we start tracking. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes